Welcome to Exact Training. This lesson is on the Inventory Control module and creating repetitive transactions. The Repetitive Manufacturing module is designed specifically for manufacturers who control their shops based on a daily going rate or daily lot sizes. By minimizing data entry, tracking requirements and overhead are reduced, while measurements and data integrity are maintained. You can receive a finished good and backflush all of the components required to build the final assembly in a single transaction. You do not have to create an order in the system, so it eliminates paperwork for repetitive environments. Repetitive production creates transaction history records so that you can keep accurate records of the production you have completed. The only information you need to enter is the parent part number, the quantity completed by the floor, and the date the transaction took place. Let's get started learning about conducting repetitive transactions. These are the steps we'll follow. From the System Manager, we'll go to the Inventory Control module, the Activity menu, and choose Transactions. We'll use the Repetitive tab. To show costing fields, first we'll turn them on in Preferences. Begin here in the System Manager and select the Materials tab. And choose the Inventory Control module. From there, choose the Activity menu and select Transactions. And the transaction window appears. This lesson is on using the Repetitive tab, so choose that one. In the transaction window, there are three main panes. The upper left has the transaction tabs, the upper right has the part stock information, and the lower pane is a grid that we will use to display the parts that are part of the query. Before we dive into the module itself, there are some default settings that you should know about. You can see these by clicking on the Options menu, then on Preferences. These preferences are user-specific. In the Preferences window, you can decide which items to appear on certain screens or reports. If Display Costs is marked, the Cost Unit field displays on all transaction tabs except the Transfer tab. Also, Unit Cost and Extended Cost columns display on the transaction grid. When Display Due Quantities is marked, the Balance Due field displays on selected transactions tabs. Also, the values displayed in the Transaction Grid Quantities column after a query match the value displayed in the Balance Due field for each order. When Display Due Quantities is not marked, the Balance Due field does not display on the selected Transaction tab. A zero value displays in the Transaction Grid Quantities columns for all line items after a query. To display on-hand quantities on the Cycle Count tab, mark the checkbox next to Display on-hand quantities in the Cycle Count box. So if you want one of these items to appear, you will need to place a check mark in this window. Let's take a look at the results of configuring these settings. We will go ahead and place a check mark in each item. Once the checks have been placed, click OK. Then close the transaction window and reopen it so the window can refresh with your new choices. These fields were not visible earlier before we placed the check marks in the Preferences window. You have two choices in the first drop-down field. Choose Repetitive to receive the parent part and issue the components. Scrap is to post component scrap for the parent part. This transaction is recorded when scrap is posted against a shop order. Let's select Repetitive to process our receipt. Select the parent part to be received or double-click in the field to choose it from a browser. Click the Search button to view all available parts. When you find one you'd like to use, double-click the row. In the Receipt Quantity field, I'll enter the number 10. Select the stock ID you want to receive the parent part to. It will default to the stock ID on the part master. The Zone field is a 10-character user-defined field. Its purpose is to help define the physical location within the stockroom. The field has a one-to-one relationship to the stock ID. It will always default first to the present zone from the part-stock relationship. Max allows the zone to be changed after displaying a warning. If a zone is changed, other stock in the same stock ID will be changed to the new zone and the quantities added together. In order to maintain two zones, two separate stock IDs must be defined. This field allows you to change the default GL accounts normally used for the transaction to now use an override GL account. These accounts are set up in the Financial Integration module. See the lesson on maintaining GL accounts for how to add these codes. Click the Search button. When you find one you'd like to use, double-click the row. The contents of these fields are defined by you and can contain 15 and 25 characters respectively. In the Reference field, Max associates information entered in the reference field, such as a document control number or other control information, with this specific transaction. Reference information appears on the transaction history reports. You can select the Process button to process the transaction. When you are finished with the transaction window, you may leave it. Click the Activity menu, then click Close, and the Transactions tabs will all be closed. You will still be in the Inventory Control module, though. The Close option has put away the transaction window, but we are still here in Inventory Control. To return to the System Manager, click the Activity menu and choose Exit. You are now back at the System Manager. In review, today we have covered inventory transactions and how to perform a repetitive transaction. Thank you for joining us at Exact Software.